Be sure to subscribe to the channel and let's promote respect for the Royal Guard together. Let the whole world see how many of us there are.
When a tourist decided to break the rules and touch the royal horse, she didn't expect her actions to spark a storm of emotions. But the crowd's reaction turned into a true sensation. The square in front of Buckingham Palace was alive with excitement. Hundreds of tourists crowded behind the barriers, vying for the perfect shot of the changing of the guard. The cobblestones shimmered with the remnants of a recent rain, while sunlight reflected off the brilliant red uniforms of the guards. Cameras clicked endlessly, creating a sound like the whisper of rain, almost drowning out the conversations. Among the crowd, one woman stood out, Karen. She was the embodiment of tourist bravado, a 45-year-old American woman with a heavy build, a beehive hairstyle, and a neon pink dress that screamed for attention. She wore a massive straw hat with a bright ribbon and shoes with loud clacking heels which only emphasized her booming voice. Karen was animatedly complaining to her companion, a thin, weary-looking man named Bill. He appeared exhausted, keeping a slight distance from her as though anticipating her antics might end in disaster. "Look at them, Bill," Karen exclaimed, waving her phone. "They don't even turn their heads. They're like lifeless robots. It's boring. People come here to see emotions, some action. They're here for us, the tourists." Her voice was so loud it caught the attention of not only nearby tourists, but also a few guards standing in the distance. Bill, apparently used to these outbursts, tried to calm her down. "Karen, let's just enjoy the ceremony. There's no need to draw attention to ourselves." But Karen ignored him entirely and continued her rant. She stopped at the barrier, a thin metal chain separating the crowd from the guards, and locked her gaze on a nearby cavalryman. The tall guardsman astride a magnificent black stallion, with perfect posture and an expressionless face, looked like a living statue. The horse stood motionless, occasionally flicking its ears in response to the hum of the crowd. "Now, that's what I call impressive," Karen muttered, staring at the horse in awe. "A real royal horse. Bill, I want a picture with it. No, I want a selfie with that horse." Bill nervously glanced around, but Karen had already stepped forward, crossing the barrier. Brimming with confidence, Karen completely ignored the warning signs and the stern glares of the guards. She stepped boldly over the barrier separating the crowd from the royal guard, triggering a wave of murmurs from the onlookers. People froze. Some pulled out their phones to record the unfolding scene. "Karen, what are you doing? That's not allowed." Bill tried to stop her, grabbing her arm, but she shook him off with an annoyed wave. "Relax, Bill. It's just a horse. Nothing's going to happen." With unshakable enthusiasm, Karen approached the guardsman sitting atop his majestic black stallion. His face remained impassive, like it was carved from stone. The horse, too, stood still, save for the subtle flick of its ears as it listened to the crowd's noise. Pulling out her phone, Karen turned toward the camera with an exaggerated, flirtatious smile, as if preparing for a triumphant photo shoot. "Look at this! I'm standing next to a royal horse," she announced loudly for everyone to hear. The crowd gasped. Tourists began whispering to one another. "Is she seriously doing this?" someone murmured. "She thinks she can get away with it," added another voice as a man raised his camera to capture the moment. Karen began taking selfies, inching closer to the horse. With each step, her actions grew bolder. To add some drama to her shot, she reached out toward the horse's face. The horse clearly didn't appreciate this intrusion. It shook its head and snorted in irritation. Karen, startled, flinched but quickly regained her composure. Seeing that no one had stopped her, she smirked. "Come on, you're a royal horse. Why so nervous?" she teased with a chuckle. She reached out again, this time to pat the horse loudly on its neck. The crowd froze in anticipation. The guardsman remained expressionless, holding his position as protocol required, But the horse had clearly reached its limit. In an instant, the horse lifted its hind leg and delivered a powerful kick, sending Karen sprawling backward. The dull thud of the impact echoed across the square as Karen let out a piercing scream and collapsed onto the cobblestones. Her wide straw hat flew off, and her phone tumbled out of her hands, skittering across the stones. The crowd gasped in unison. A few people screamed. Others covered their mouths in shock, but some continued filming without missing a beat. Karen lay on the ground, struggling to process what had just happened. Her face twisted in a mixture of pain, shock, and confusion. She clutched her side, but to her surprise, she managed to move, eliciting a collective sigh of relief from the onlookers. "That was just unbelievable," someone whispered in the crowd. "She deserved it," another voice remarked. The horse, on the other hand, regained its composure almost instantly. It stood still, as calm as if nothing had happened. The guardsman, true to his duty, didn't even glance at Karen, maintaining his unflinching posture. This only heightened the sense of control and authority emanating from the royal guard, something Karen now fully realized, albeit too late. The square, previously filled with odd whispers and the soft flicker of camera flashes, suddenly erupted into chaos. Karen's loud scream echoed across the cobblestones, followed by a chorus of gasps from the crowd. The energy shifted instantly. Some people craned their necks to see what had happened, while others instinctively raised their phones to capture every moment. The guards, like statues, remained at their posts, adhering strictly to protocol. Not one of them reacted to the woman's fall or the ensuing commotion. Even the horse, the unwitting cause of the incident, stood perfectly still, exuding an aura of calm, as though it were all part of its royal duties. Meanwhile, Karen, lying on the pavement, struggled to collect herself. Her neon-pink dress was smeared with dust, one of her shoes had flown off, and her straw hat lay several feet away. With great effort, she managed to push herself onto her knees, clutching her side and wincing in pain. Her face was a mix of shock, pain, and bewilderment. The crowd buzzed with noise. Someone suggested calling for help, while others continued recording. To everyone's surprise, Karen suddenly leapt to her feet, her face contorted in anger. "This is unacceptable," she yelled, pointing a trembling finger at the horse. "Someone needs to do something about that animal." Her voice cut through the other sounds, and for a moment, the crowd fell silent. But what happened next was something Karen clearly hadn't anticipated. The first laugh was quiet, almost stifled, but it quickly spread. Laughter rippled through the crowd like a wave. Someone in the front row laughed openly, then clapped their hands, and soon more people joined in. "Well done, buddy. Great job," someone shouted from the back, gesturing toward the horse. Karen froze, unable to believe her ears. She scanned the crowd, searching for support, but all she found were amused smirks and phones pointed directly at her. The crowd applauded the horse and shouted quips. "The royal defense system works perfectly. That's what happens when you mess with the Queen's horses." Karen, her face flushed red with anger, tried to regain control of the situation. Spreading her arms wide as if appealing to reason, she shouted, "This is dangerous. Who even allows these animals to be here?" But her words only fueled the laughter. The crowd roared louder, applauding the horse and sharing their amusement as cameras continued to capture the scene. The atmosphere of the square had transformed into something more like a comedy show than the regal changing of the guard. Realizing she was fighting a losing battle, Karen let her arms drop to her sides. No one was going to take her side. Her companion, Bill, who had been standing off to the side the entire time, finally stepped forward. Placing a hand on her shoulder, he whispered, "Karen, please, just let it go. You brought this on yourself." She spun around to face him but didn't respond. At that moment, her gaze landed on the unflinching guardsman, who, despite all the chaos, continued to stand stoically at his post. His composure only highlighted the absurdity of her actions. Karen tried to salvage what little dignity she had left. Straightening her back, she brushed the dust off her dress and, wobbling slightly, walked over to retrieve her hat. The crowd continued to laugh and shout comments as she bent to pick up her shoe and hat. Without a word, she turned and hobbled away, leaving the square as the laughter and applause followed her. But the story was far from over. The events of the day had already spread throughout the square and were rapidly making their way to the internet. As the crowd dispersed, people continued discussing the incident. "This is going viral. I hope she learned her lesson." Karen, limping slightly, realized the lesson had already been taught, and it was a painfully public one. A few minutes later, security personnel arrived at the scene. They politely but firmly asked Karen to leave the premises. One of the guards explained that her actions had violated the rules of conduct for the area. "Ma'am, the barriers are there for a reason. These horses are not decorative. They are part of the royal protocol," he said firmly. Karen, her face burning with humiliation, attempted to argue, but Bill persuaded her to leave. Whispering to her, he said, "You've done enough already." The story quickly spread across social media. The video of the guardsman's horse striking back at Karen garnered millions of views and thousands of comments. For some, it was a lesson in respecting traditions. For others, it was a hilarious example of human folly. Karen, meanwhile, found herself the subject of unexpected fame. She became widely known as the woman who angered the Queen's horse. Her trip to London had turned into a cautionary tale. Sometimes rules exist for a reason, and ignoring them can have consequences.